There is a peculiar sensation that accompanies the honest contemplation of time, the feeling that we are always on the verge of truly living, yet somehow perpetually late to our own lives. We glance backward and call it memory, we look forward and call it plan or hope or fear, but the present, in which everything actually unfolds, often slips past unnoticed. Many philosophers have called time an illusion, and many scientists have flagged its strangeness. But what matters for anyone seeking a life of depth and meaning is not whether time exists in an ultimate sense. What matters is whether we can learn to dwell in the tiny theater where our choices and love and attention converge. Can we inhabit the now with integrity and clarity, without floating into denial of responsibility or drifting into the anxious haze of constant anticipation? The query is not trivial. It is not a matter of turning off clocks or renouncing your calendar. It is a question about the architecture of consciousness, about where attention goes, about the story we tell ourselves about what matters, and about the quality of presence we bring to our days. Before we move on, a quick note. If you're finding this reflection meaningful, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us reach more thoughtful viewers, and you'll stay connected with new explorations like this one. When people say that time is an illusion, they often mean different things. One claim is metaphysical, that past, present, and future are equally real, that our experience of flow is a feature of the mind rather than a property of reality. Another claim is psychological, that what we call time is, for us, a flexible canvas painted by attention and emotion. Recall the afternoon that seemed to last forever when you were a child, the school day that stretched like a desert, the summer that felt like 2 lifetimes. Compare that to last week, which may feel like a compressed file that you can barely unzip. Psychologists have studied this elasticity for decades. Novelty expands perceived time. Routine contracts it. Fear can slow your sense of time's passage. People consistently report that accidents feel in slow motion, while attention loss accelerates it. If time bends to attention, then the question of living in the present becomes, at least in part, a question of training attention. Yet we must not leap from psychological malleability to metaphysical dismissal. Clocks still matter when catching trains. Deadlines still govern obligations. If we mistake the invitation to presence for a negation of responsibility, we will crash into avoidable consequences. Living in the present is not an escape hatch from the future or a disavowal of the past. It is a way of relating to both without abandoning the only arena in which we can act. A good metaphor is the sailor at sea. The past is the wake the boat leaves behind. Informative, often beautiful, sometimes turbulent, but no longer steerable. The future is the horizon, a direction toward which we orient. But the helm is in the present hands, on the present water, with the present wind. To steer well is to be with what is happening now while letting knowledge from the wake and intention toward the horizon shape one's course. Consider how our minds tend to operate by default. We flicker between rumination and worry. Rumination replays old scenes, often with a harsh narrator who prefers indictment to understanding. Worry rehearses possible futures, often with a catastrophist director who recasts uncertainty as doom. Both processes have their uses. Memory supports learning, anticipation supports preparation, but both can become compulsive loops that erode the dignity of the present. Research on mind wandering suggests that a wandering mind is, more often than not, an unhappy mind. It is not that imagination or planning makes us miserable. It is that unchosen, unskillful mental time travel detaches us from the sensations, relationships, and tasks currently available to us. We miss the laughter of a child within arm's reach because we are mentally litigating a meeting that ended 2 hours ago. We burn a meal while envisioning a conversation that may never happen. The cost is not only practical, it is existential. Life is not an abstract quantity to be optimized. It is lived in scenes. To habitually vacate those scenes is to downsize our own life. If we want to live in the present more fully, we might begin by asking a difficult question. What problem do we believe endless mental time travel is trying to solve? Often, it is the mind's way of seeking safety. The mind imagines that if it can replay enough contingencies, there will be no pain, no loss, no humiliation. But there is a bitter irony here. The attempt to outthink uncertainty is itself a source of suffering, because it is endless and ineffective. No number of mental rehearsals will guarantee how tomorrow's conversation will unfold. No volume of self-critique will convert yesterday's choice into something else. What can reduce suffering is a different kind of skill, learning to reside with what is here, to meet it with steadiness and care, and to respond with wisdom moment by moment. This is not a belief system. It is a trainable capacity. Let us be practical. The present is not a foggy ideal. It is concrete. It is the feeling of the ground under your feet. It is the quality of your breath as you read this. It is the tone in your voice as you speak to someone you love this evening. It is the data in your spreadsheet. It is the tension in your shoulders that announces fatigue or fear. Presence is not mystical. It is the decision to attend. Furthermore, attention is not a brittle, zero-sum resource that must be protected behind walls. Attention can be strengthened and directed through practice, just as muscles are strengthened through deliberate effort. If we want to feel the reality of the present, we must practice touching it. There are several domains in which this practice can unfold. The first is bodily awareness. Bodies do not exist in the past or future. They exist now, giving us a direct route to the present. Simple exercises: 5 slow breaths noticing only the rise and fall of your abdomen. A 5-minute scan from toes to scalp noticing tension and warmth. A walk in which you track the pressure of your feet and the movement of your arms are not trivialities. They re-anchor the turbulent mind in the stable fact of the lived moment. Over weeks and months, such practices condition the nervous system toward steadiness. Neuroscientific studies regularly show plastic changes in regions associated with attention and emotion regulation after consistent mindfulness training. It is neither a cure-all nor a placebo. It is a skill that makes the present more accessible. The second domain is narrative reframing. The story you tell about time shapes your possibility space. If you tell yourself that life is a race against a closing window, you will move with frantic urgency and constant scarcity. If you tell yourself that life is an unfolding inquiry, a sequence of offerings rather than a chain of deadlines, you will move with a different kind of energy. This is not about denying mortality or pretending that obligations are optional. It is about choosing metaphors that loosen the grip of panic and widen your capacity to respond. Notice how your language reveals your stance. "I'm running out of time" may be true in a local sense, but repeated unexamined, it becomes a mantra of compression. "I have this hour to give fully to what matters most now" is also true, and it returns agency to your hands. The third domain is relational presence. We do not live alone inside skulls. We live in webs of connection. To live in the present is not merely to sit alone and breathe. It is to attend to another human face with full attention, to listen until the other person has finished being heard. The research on active listening is not exotic, but its implications are profound. People who feel heard become less defensive, more creative, and more honest. Families shift. Teams function. Conflict softens. When we give our presence to someone else, we are not losing time. We are transfiguring it. The minutes carry a different density. They become moments that alter the trajectory of lives. A fourth domain is purposeful action. The present is not solely for contemplation. It is the staging ground for doing. One of the paradoxes of presence is that it can either energize you to act or lull you into passivity, depending on how you frame it. If presence becomes synonymous with numb detachment, you have misunderstood it. Real presence includes responsibility. It says, "In this hour, what can I do that aligns with my values and moves my world a millimeter toward goodness?" Set one clear intention per block of time. For the next 40 minutes, I will draft the proposal. For the next 20 minutes, I will play with my child without my phone. For the next 10 minutes, I will tidy the kitchen. When presence is operationalized into simple, finite commitments, it stops being an abstraction and starts being a method. Over time, this method creates a life saturated with meaning. It is important to name the barriers that make presence difficult. The modern environment is engineered to interfere with attention. Notifications fragment our awareness into dozens of shards per hour. Multitasking masquerades as productivity when it is often switch-cost math done badly. Context switching siphons cognitive resources, making even simple tasks feel heavy. The solution is not to demonize technology but to negotiate with it wisely. Create spaces in your day that are notification-free. Use your device intentionally rather than reflexively. Build rituals into your environment, placing the phone out of reach during meals, for example, that remind you that presence is a choice supported by design. Attention loves context. If you design the context well, attention comes home. Another barrier is fear of feeling. Many of us flee the present not because it is dull, but because it contains unprocessed sorrow, anger, or shame. The future offers fantasies that anesthetize. The past offers identities that sedate. The now offers the rawness we least want to confront. But unprocessed emotions do not disappear. They leak into the future you seek to control. If you can learn to sit with discomfort without panic, you discover that emotions are waves. They rise, crest, and fall. You are not the ocean's churn. You are the awareness that can hold its movement. Practices like labeling emotions in simple language, fear, sadness, frustration, have been shown to reduce their physiological grip. Combine that with breathing and compassionate self-talk. This is difficult, and I can meet it. And you reclaim territory from the compulsive need to escape the present. The question remains, is living in the present actually possible? Or is it a dream polished by poets and monks and sold to exhausted workers as a balm? The honest answer is that living exclusively in the present is neither feasible nor desirable. Our gift as humans includes memory and foresight. They are not enemies of presence. They are instruments to be tuned. But living more in the present, returning again and again to the only point where we can touch the world, that is deeply possible. It is not achieved once and kept forever. It is a practice you do not finish, like sweeping the floor or feeding the body. You do it because life gets dusty, because hunger returns, because presence evaporates under heat. And you do it because the alternative, chronic absence from your own life, is too costly to bear. This practice does not require dramatic gestures. Start by promising yourself pockets of unbroken attention. The morning sun touches the window. Stand there for a minute and let yourself be there, fully. When you drink water, drink it and feel it. When you greet a colleague, look at their face and name something you appreciate about them silently. When you finish a task, take the extra 30 seconds to mark its completion rather than tumbling immediately into the next. These are small acts, but they add weight to the present, and weight creates gravity, and gravity keeps you from drifting away. It also helps to define what the present is not. It is not impulsivity. It is not indifference to consequence. It is not a spiritualized excuse for neglect. If anything, presence sharpens consequence, because it situates choices where they matter. To be present is to be more ethical, not less. When you feel the impact of your words now, you are more likely to choose ones that do not harm. When you notice your body's fatigue now, you are more likely to rest before resentment calcifies. When you feel gratitude now, you voice it while it still has the power to heal. There is a deeper layer to this inquiry, one that touches mystery. If we attend carefully to the present, we may discover that the self we are trying to defend through plans and regrets is itself a kind of story. The mind conjures a narrator, a continuity thread that gives cohesion to our memory and intention. This is useful for functional life, but in the intimate texture of the moment, the taste of tea, the warmth of a hand, the stretch in a muscle, the narrator quiets. What remains is experience unadorned. Some traditions call this openness awareness. Others call it the true self or no self. Labels aside, the discovery is similar. The world is more vivid when you are not constantly arranging yourself. Paradoxically, this makes you more available to love, to work, to creativity. You are less consumed by the task of being someone and more concerned with actually engaging what is here. Let us not romanticize. Life will still bruise you. Loss will come. Some fears are rational and require action. Planning remains essential. The bills will not pay themselves if you breathe more consciously. But presence does not compete with practicality. It dignifies it. A plan made from presence is usually wiser than one made from panic. A memory held from presence is gentler than one clutched by shame. A boundary set from presence is clearer than one shouted from exhaustion. In this way, presence becomes a strategy for living, not merely a mood. Here is a simple experiment for the next 7 days. Each morning, ask yourself one question. What will make today feel well lived by nightfall? Keep the answer small. It could be, call my mother, write 600 words, take a walk without headphones, cook a simple meal, sit in silence for 10 minutes, then place that act in your calendar, not as a vague hope but as an appointment with your life. When the time comes, protect it. If you fail one day, you do not have to justify or dramatize it. Begin again the next day. This is not about success metrics. It is about forming a habit of honoring the present with concrete devotion. The illusion of time as a thesis can seduce us into arguing about physics or metaphysics. That conversation is fascinating and worthy, but it is not necessary for the transformation that is available to you. Whether time flows or stands still in the deep structure of the cosmos, you will still wake to the choice of attention. You can animate your hours with vigor and care, or you can watch them evaporate in the lukewarm bath of distractions. Choose imperfectly again and again to return. That is the practice. When you catch yourself living in the future with clenched teeth, exhale and ask, what is actually happening now? Name it without comment. Sitting at my desk, feeling heat in my face, hearing traffic, tightness in my chest. Already, the present has answers that worry does not provide. When you catch yourself pummeling yourself with the past, ask, what is the lesson I can extract with compassion? Can I grieve without self-violence? Can I apologize where needed and then step forward? The present can hold remorse without turning it into identity. It can hold hope without inflating it into fantasy. It can hold you without asking you to be anything other than awake. Imagine, for a moment, that your life is a book that someone you love will someday read. How much of it do you want to be footnotes about what might happen? How much do you want to be annotations about what already did? Footnotes and annotations are useful, but where is the story? The story is in scenes you inhabited. The story is in the afternoon you noticed the way light touched your friend's hair, and you said nothing but felt, fully, the gift of companionship. The story is in the hour you gave to a stubborn problem and cracked it open. The story is in the apology you spoke before pride won. The story is in laughter that surprised you out of a dark mood. The story is in the meals you cooked and the hands you held and the wisdom you permitted yourself to learn slowly. Living in the present is not a denial of the story's arc. It is the only way to write it. Finally, consider the end not morbidly but honestly. One day there will be a last time. A last time you taste a certain fruit, a last time you hear a certain song, a last time you walk a certain street. If this awareness brings sorrow, let it. If it brings reverence, let that too. The point is not to accumulate a sterile museum of moments but to allow impermanence to concentrate your love. When you know that the hour is finite, you pour yourself into it. Presence becomes a form of generosity, to yourself, to others, to the world. And generosity, in turn, becomes a different way of living with time. You are no longer its victim or its tyrant. You are its partner. The minutes are not enemies. They are the medium through which your care becomes visible. If the illusion of time means anything to ordinary life, it is this: we are freer than we suppose to choose where we place our mind. That freedom is never absolute, and sometimes it is hemmed in by pain or fear or circumstance. But it is real. And every instance in which you reclaim even a fragment of attention from the centrifuge of distraction is a quiet victory. Do not wait for a perfect day to practice. This day is already full enough to hold you. Return now to the question with fresh eyes. Is it possible to live in the present? Perhaps the better framing is, how close can we come and what changes when we do? The first part of the answer requires humility. We will not achieve perfect presence because human minds are predictive engines, evolved to anticipate. But the second part of the answer is bold. We can approach presence closely enough that our experience of life transforms. This transformation is not a theatrical revelation but a steady reconfiguration of habits, attention, and values. Begin with habits because they are the architecture of days. Habits either conceal the present or reveal it. A morning ritual that begins with email, for example, entrains the nervous system into immediate reactivity. Your attention becomes a commodity traded to the highest bidder. Contrast that with a morning that begins with a quiet check-in. How is my body? What matters today? What single task deserves my first, freshest hour? This is not self-indulgence. It is governance. You allocate your best currency, attention, deliberately. Over time, this one shift alters your life's texture. The present is no longer a hallway you sprint through on your way to other hallways. It becomes a room you furnish and inhabit. Next, consider the role of values. Presence without values can devolve into aestheticism, a fetish for sunsets that never touches the substance of your commitments. Values translate presence into conduct. They answer the question, what deserves my presence? If you have not articulated your values, you will donate your attention to whoever asks loudest. Write them down, simply. Family, learning, service, health, beauty, craft, truth, whatever is honest for you. Then ask, each week, how your calendar reflects those values. Presence deepens when your hours rhyme with your convictions. A person whose stated value is health but whose presence is constantly captured by work emails is living out of tune. The discomfort you feel in such dissonance is not a flaw to be smoothed over. It is your integrity asking for alignment. We should also acknowledge time's social dimension. Not everyone has equal access to the present. Economic and social pressures can compress people's time into a series of obligations that leave little space for ease. The invitation to presence can sound like a luxury to someone juggling multiple jobs or caring for dependents without support. This means two things. First, any suggestion that presence is simply a matter of willpower ignores structural realities. Second, presence still matters precisely because it can create small sanctuaries within unjust conditions. A 10-minute window of unfragmented attention may be the difference between burnout and endurance. Moreover, when we cultivate presence, we often gain clarity to advocate for changes that expand presence for others, through better policies, fairer schedules, and more humane expectations. There is also a practical, evidence-informed side to presence that is worth making explicit. Consider flow states, as described by researchers who study optimal experience. Flow occurs when a person's skills are well matched to a challenging task, when goals are clear and feedback is immediate. In such states, self-consciousness recedes and time perception alters. Hours pass like minutes, or minutes expand with richness. While we cannot live in perpetual flow, we can design more of our work and play to invite it. Setting clear goals, selecting tasks that stretch but do not overwhelm, minimizing interruptions, and cultivating competence. Presence is not only a contemplative practice. It is a design principle for productivity and joy. Sleep deserves special attention. Without adequate sleep, the capacity for presence decays rapidly. The prefrontal cortex, essential for attention control and emotion regulation, is compromised by sleep deprivation. You will be more reactive, less patient, and more likely to feed the very loops you hope to quiet. Treat sleep as a moral choice that affects not only your performance but your kindness. Structure your evenings to protect it. Dim light, regular timing, gentle transitions. When you wake rested, the present is less like a moving target and more like a familiar friend. Nutrition, movement, and breath form a triad of physical practices that support presence. Food influences mood and cognition. Highly processed meals can create spikes and crashes that mirror the mind's own ricochets. Favoring whole foods is not an aesthetic preference but a functional one. Likewise, movement, whether vigorous exercise or gentle stretching, flushes stress hormones, stabilizes mood, and gives the mind a home in the body. Breathing, astonishingly mundane, is a lever to the nervous system. Slow, diaphragmatic breathing can shift you from sympathetic arousal toward parasympathetic calm within minutes. These are not esoteric secrets. They are basics, and basics done consistently are what presence feeds on. Technology, earlier cast as a negotiable adversary, can also be an ally. Tools for focus, timers, website blockers, distraction-free writing modes are a kind of external scaffolding for internal intention. Calendars can be sanctuaries if you populate them with what matters and decline what does not. Reminders can prompt micro-moments of presence. A chime that says, "Relax your shoulders." A note on your lock screen that asks, "What's real right now?" The key is that technology should reflect your values rather than dictate them. Audit your digital life periodically. Which apps make you more present? Which fracture you? Keep the former. Delete or constrain the latter. Freedom is not only the absence of constraints. It is the presence of the right ones. There will be resistance. Part of you may equate presence with boredom, fearing that if you stop rehearsing the future and relitigating the past, you will be left with a thin, flavorless now. This fear misunderstands the nature of reality. The present is not thin. Our attention is often thin. When attention thickens, the world reveals intricacy. The air has temperature and scent, the voice has timbre, the problem has subtleties that invite craft. Artistry of any kind, cooking, coding, carpentry, conversation, depends on this thickened attention. Boredom is often a sign that attention has not yet ripened for the task at hand. You can cultivate ripeness by staying a little longer, probing a little deeper, making the meta-move of curiosity. What am I missing? What detail wants my care? The past asks for a different kind of presence. Remembrance without captivity. Memory handled well is a teacher. We can revisit the past to extract meaning, to witness growth, to honor grief. Rituals help. Writing letters to your younger self, visiting places of origin, creating annual reflections that summarize lessons rather than reanimate shame. Presence does not require amnesia. It invites an adult relationship with memory, one in which you can hold former versions of yourself with tenderness and invite them to inform, not govern, your actions. Likewise, the future asks for wise anticipation without worship. Planning is a gift when it is anchored in reality and open to revision. Make plans in pencil. Dream generously, then return your hands to the tools of today. Relationships remain one of the highest arenas for present-moment living. There is a kind of listening that changes both speaker and listener. It involves allowing silence to exist without anxiety, asking questions that do not lead the witness, reflecting back what you have heard without overlaying your agenda. Try this experiment in your next conversation. For 5 minutes, set aside the urge to insert your story. Attend to cadence, word choice, pauses. Notice your own impulses. Do not suppress them. Let them pass. Often, within those minutes, something true emerges that would have drowned under interruption. Your presence becomes a vessel in which another person's truth can arrive. This is not passive. It is active care. And as you develop this capacity, you find that the quality of your relationships deepens. People sense when you are with them rather than near them. Work, in its many forms, is another field where presence must be reclaimed from the cult of busyness. Busyness, like smoke, can fill a room without adding heat or light. Presence asks, what is the work only I can do, the work that matters most in this role at this moment? It then asks, what can I stop doing, delegate, or defer? The courage to subtract is integral to presence. When you stop strafing your day with yes, you grant yourself the possibility of depth. Depth is where satisfaction lives. It is also where excellence is born. A person who can sustain attention on a worthy problem for long spans will produce better answers than a person who disperses attention across dozens of trivialities. In cultural environments that reward visible hustle over invisible quality, you will need to tolerate misunderstanding. Presence sometimes resembles slowness to those addicted to urgency. Be patient. Let your results speak. Consider creativity. Many imagine it as a lightning strike, but practitioners know it thrives in routines that court the present. A poet sits and watches the mind, fingers moving even when no thunder speaks. A programmer leans into a naughty bug, inhabiting the logic tree until the path lights up. A teacher adapts mid-lesson to the energy in the room, based not on rigid plans but on what is alive in the students' faces. Creativity is an intimacy with reality that cannot be faked. It uses memory and imagination, yes, but it is consummated in presence. If you wish to be more creative, you must be more here. There is an ethical dimension to presence that cannot be overlooked. When we are absent, we are more likely to harm without noticing. We interrupt because we are rushing. We cut corners because we are anxious. We ignore someone's pain because we are rehearsing lines for an imaginary audience. Presence slows the moment enough for conscience to speak. It also accelerates repair. When you are present, you notice the flinch when your words land harshly, and you can soften, apologize, adjust. In this sense, presence is not merely self-help. It is a civic virtue. A society of present people would be less cruel, because cruelty often relies on distance from consequence. What of the spiritual dimension? For many, the practice of presence converges with their deepest questions about meaning. Some find in presence a path to the sacred, a way of meeting reality without the noise of constant striving. Others, secular in orientation, find that presence enlarges their sense of wonder without necessitating metaphysical commitments. Both experiences are legitimate. Presence is capacious enough to hold faith and doubt alike. The common thread is reverence, a posture of respect toward existence itself. Reverence does not require grand gestures. It thrives in the way you wash dishes, the way you greet the morning, the way you decline an invitation because you know your limits. It is a style of being that treats the world not as a backdrop for your ambition but as a partnership. We should talk about setbacks. You will forget. You will fall back into old loops. You will doom scroll past midnight and wake brittle. You will snap at someone you love. The temptation is to translate these lapses into verdicts. I can't do this. I'm not built for presence. Resist that. The measure is not perfection but return. The moment you notice you are gone, you are already back. The noticing is the hinge. Train yourself to celebrate the noticing, however late it arrives. Turn it into a ritual. A breath, a smile, a gentle "here I am." Such rituals change the atmosphere inside you. Over months, you begin to trust that presence is accessible even in storms. Children and elders can teach us here. Children are not better than adults, but they are often more immediate. They throw their bodies into play, heedless of elegance, and in doing so they model a kind of wholehearted presence we forget. Elders, in contrast, often carry a seasoned presence, one that knows the contours of loss and continues anyway. Spend time with both. Learn from the exuberant immediacy of the young and the quiet steadiness of the old. Notice how presence shifts shape across the lifespan but remains the same in essence. An honest meeting with what is. Gratitude is a staircase to presence. Not performative gratitude that polishes social images, but intimate gratitude that names specifics. I am grateful for the exact shade of blue on the mug in my hand. I am grateful for the way my friend texts a joke when I am quiet too long. I am grateful for the stiffness in my legs that tells me I worked hard. Specificity hooks gratitude into the now. Over time, this practice trains your attention to scan for gifts rather than threats, without blinding you to real danger. It is not naivete. It is calibration. A mind that can perceive beauty alongside risk is more resilient than a mind that perceives only risk. Humility is another companion. Presence is easier when you relinquish the fantasy of control. This does not mean passivity. It means clear boundaries around what is yours to influence and what is not. You can prepare for the interview. You cannot control the interviewer's mood. You can practice your craft. You cannot command reception. You can care for your health. You cannot command immortality. When you stop trying to manage the uncontrollable, you reclaim capacities for what is possible now. Serenity prayer variants exist in many traditions for good reason. They encode the wisdom of presence. There is a quiet courage involved in living this way. It takes courage to put the phone down when everyone is still swiping, to say no when the culture rewards yes, to prioritize depth over display. It takes courage to feel grief fully and not flee, to celebrate small joys without apology, to attend to what is unglamorous but essential. This courage is not grandiose. It accumulates in choices so small they are invisible to most. But you will feel the difference. Life becomes less like a siege and more like a stewardship. Let us return to the initial paradox. Time may be an illusion, but deadlines are real. How do we reconcile presence with schedules? By distinguishing between pacing and hurrying. Pacing is strategic. It acknowledges constraints and sequences work wisely. Hurrying is frantic. It sprays attention across tasks without inhabiting any. You can move quickly while being present. Nurses do this in emergency rooms every day. The difference is that presence brings order. One step, then the next, breath by breath. When you feel the slide into hurry, pause for a single full inhale and exhale. This is not wasted time. It is the micro-adjustment that keeps you competent. As you cultivate presence, you may notice that your sense of identity shifts. You become less attached to being right and more invested in being accurate, less attached to being seen and more invested in seeing. This is not self-erasure. It is maturation. You discover that life is less about performing a role and more about answering the question of the moment with integrity. In this sense, presence becomes a kind of freedom. You are no longer as bound by scripts handed to you by earlier fears or external expectations. You can improvise truthfully. What, practically, does an ordinary present-centered day look like? It might begin with wakefulness instead of alarm-driven sprinting. A minute of noticing breath, a stretch, a glass of water. It includes a defined block of focused work punctuated by brief, intentional breaks, perhaps a walk without your phone, eyes on the sky. It includes a meal eaten without multitasking, tasting your food, perhaps in conversation that you actually inhabit. It includes a candid check-in with someone you love. It includes an adjustment when something goes wrong, an apology delivered without theatrics. It includes an evening wind down that tells the body the day is closing. Dim lights, less input, a few lines in a journal naming 3 things that gave the day weight. It is not an Instagram day. It is simply honest, and that honesty accumulates into a life that feels lived rather than performed. Nature can be an ally. Not everyone has access to dramatic landscapes, but even a city tree line or a sliver of sky can recalibrate attention. Nature's rhythms are stubbornly present. The wind does not plan. It moves. The river does not reminisce. It flows. We are not rivers or wind, but time in nature often quiets the nervous system enough for presence to re-enter. If you can make contact with non-human reality daily, it need not be long. Even 2 minutes of direct sunlight upon waking can anchor your circadian rhythm, helping sleep, which helps presence, which helps everything else. Finally, let us imagine the ripples of a present life. You wake more often without dread. You greet others with fewer preloaded judgments. You work with more care and less noise. You forgive yourself sooner. You savor small good things without needing to broadcast them. You summon courage to face hard truths without anesthetic. You do not become a saint. You remain human, but your humanity is less obscured by fog. The moments that compose your days begin to cohere into something that feels like a vocation rather than a scramble. And when, inevitably, you are asked to face endings of relationships, of seasons of life itself, you carry into those thresholds a familiarity with the present that makes letting go tender rather than terrorizing. You have practiced arrival so many times that even departure feels like a kind of arrival. Into honesty, into love, into whatever comes next. The illusion of time, if we hold it gently, becomes not a negation of reality but an invitation to attend to the only reality we can touch. Whether you believe that past, present, and future are equally real, or that time is a succession of nows, your life is lived in attention. Attend to what you love. Attend to who you love. Attend to the work that bears your signature. Attend to the body that makes your attention possible. Attend to the world that is, in every moment, offering you 1,000 unnoticed gifts. You will forget. You will remember. You will forget again. And again you will return. In the end, the question, is living in the present possible? Dissolves into practice. You do not need certainty to proceed. Begin where you are. Take one breath on purpose. Choose one action that matters, and do it without scattering yourself. Offer one generous listening. Close one day with gratitude, however small. Then repeat. The repetition is not monotony. It is devotion. Over time, devotion changes the texture of your days. You find yourself less enthralled by the mind's disastrous theater and more engaged with the modest miracles at hand. The clock keeps ticking. The calendar keeps turning. But you are less at war with them. You have made peace not by escaping time but by entering it fully. And from that place you discover a life that does not merely pass, but shines.